The silver Porsche taken emerged from dawn's amber haze like a ghost from another world. Ryan Mitchell pressed his face against the cracked window, watching manicured fingers tap against Italian leather steering wheel in perfect rhythm. Sevenamy, the stranger stepped out, charcoal cashmere coat flowing like liquid shadow, pearl earrings catching fragments of morning light, movements precise as a surgeon's blade. Her heels clicked against his weathered concrete steps with the confidence of someone who owned everything she touched. Ryan's trembling hand found his phone on the kitchen counter, screen still glowing with last night's desperation. A father's broken plea fired into digital darkness, returned with that merciless red failure notice. The woman's knock came soft as whispered secrets, 3 deliberate taps. When he opened the door, her emerald eyes swept over his hollow cheeks, his wrinkled shirt, his shaking hands that hadn't stopped trembling since Hazel's fever spiked. "I'm here about the message you sent regarding your daughter." Her voice carried silk and steel in equal measure. She paused, studying his face like she was reading a map to buried treasure. Ryan's mouth opened, but no sound escaped. Behind him, the coffee maker gurgled its last breath, filling the silence between them with mechanical wheezing that seemed to mock his speechlessness. The woman's gaze drifted past his shoulder, taking in the medical bills scattered across his kitchen table like fallen autumn leaves, each one stamped with red ink that screamed overdue. Her expression never shifted, not pity, not judgment, just the calm assessment of someone used to measuring disasters in dollars and cents. "May I come in?" she asked, though her foot was already crossing his threshold with the presumption of someone accustomed to automatic compliance. The morning light caught the gold clasp of her handbag, and Ryan noticed how her fingers never stopped moving, tracing invisible patterns against the leather, as if she were writing secrets in the air. Hazel's cough echoed from the upstairs bedroom, a wet sound that cut through Ryan like broken glass, dragged across his soul. The woman's head tilted toward the noise with the sharp attention of a hunting bird, and for the first time, something flickered behind her professional mask. A crack in the porcelain that revealed something raw and human underneath. "She's getting worse," Ryan whispered, the words scraping against his throat like sandpaper against raw wood. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact he'd been living with for months, watching his 7-year-old daughter fade like a photograph left too long in sunlight. The stranger nodded once, a sharp movement that somehow conveyed both understanding and urgency with surgical precision. She stepped fully into his living room, her designer heels silent now against his threadbare carpet, moving with the controlled grace of someone who had learned to navigate other people's grief without disturbing the fragile architecture of their pain. "My name is Dr. Veronica Sterling," she said, removing leather gloves with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd performed this ritual countless times in countless homes where hope had worn thin as tissue paper. "3 years ago, I was your wife's oncologist at Cedar-Sinai Medical Center." The words hit Ryan like ice water poured directly onto his spine, washing over him in waves of recognition and pain that threatened to buckle his knees. Sarah's face flashed before his eyes, pale and brave in that sterile hospital bed, her hand gripping his while Dr. Sterling explained why the chemotherapy had stopped working, why their time was measured in weeks rather than months. He remembered those same emerald eyes, clinical and kind, delivering news that shattered his world into pieces he was still trying to fit back together with trembling fingers and sleepless nights. The Christmas card he'd sent to thank her afterward, signed with Sarah's shaky handwriting just weeks before the cancer claimed her voice forever. Veronica's fingers traced the edge of his coffee table, where dust motes danced in the morning sunlight like tiny spirits celebrating their freedom from the weight of gravity. "I kept that card," she said softly, reading his thoughts with the unsettling accuracy of someone who had spent years interpreting the unspoken language of grief. "Your wife wrote that she hoped I would never have to watch my own child suffer the way she did." Ryan's knees buckled without warning, and he sank into his worn armchair, the the springs groaning under his sudden weight like old bones settling into familiar pain. The room spun around him as memories crashed together in violent collision. Sarah's final Christmas morning, her brave smile as she wrapped presents with hands that shook from medication. Hazel's first symptoms appearing just months after the funeral, like some cruel cosmic joke. Veronica remained standing, her presence filling the small space with the kind of expensive perfume that belonged in boardrooms and charity galas rather than shabby living rooms where dreams went to die. "The message you sent last night," Veronica continued, producing a phone from her coat pocket, with movements so controlled they seemed choreographed, "was meant for my daughter Isabella's number." The screen showed Ryan's desperate text in brutal clarity that made his stomach clench with fresh shame. "Please, if anyone sees this, my little girl is dying, and I can't afford the treatment. I don't know what else to do." Below it, a timestamp showing 11:47 p.m., the exact moment when exhaustion and desperation had made his fingers clumsy with hope and terror. That devastating red exclamation mark had haunted his dreams for 12 hours. A digital scarlet letter marking him as the kind of father who begged strangers for miracles he couldn't afford. "Isabella showed it to me this morning over breakfast," Veronica said, her voice cracking almost imperceptibly, like ice forming on still water. "She's 8 years old, and wanted to know why the man was so sad about his daughter, why rich people don't help when they can." Ryan buried his face in his hands, shame burning through his chest like acid poured directly onto an open wound. The text had been a moment of complete breakdown. 3 a.m. desperation after watching Hazel struggle through another sleepless night, her fever climbing despite everything he'd tried, her small body hot as a furnace against his chest while he whispered promises he couldn't keep. He'd typed those words into the void of his phone's message app, never intending to send them into the digital wilderness where strangers lived their complicated lives. But exhaustion had made his fingers clumsy and his judgment clouded by panic. "I'm sorry," he mumbled through his palms, the words muffled and inadequate. "I never meant to bother anyone with our problems. It was an accident, a moment of weakness." The apology felt hollow, insufficient for the magnitude of his humiliation at becoming the kind of man who sent desperate messages to random phone numbers, begging for miracles from a universe that had already taken too much. "Don't apologize," Veronica said, her voice sharp enough to cut through his spiral of self-pity like a blade through silk. "That message may have saved your daughter's life." She moved to the window with fluid grace, her silhouette framed against the morning light, like a guardian angel dressed in designer clothing and carrying a handbag worth more than his car. "After Sarah died, I left clinical practice," she continued, her reflection in the glass looking younger somehow, vulnerable in a way that didn't match her expensive exterior or the confident manner with which she'd entered his life. "I couldn't watch any more patients slip away while I stood helpless with my medical degree and empty hands, promising families that we were doing everything possible when possible had already revealed its cruel limitations." Her words carried the weight of accumulated grief, the kind that settles into your bones and changes the way you move through the world. "I started a biotech company focused on pediatric oncology, developing targeted therapies for children with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, children exactly like Hazel." Hazel's footsteps whispered across the ceiling above them, light as butterfly wings, but enough to make Ryan's heart clench with the familiar combination of protective terror and desperate love that had become his constant companion. "Daddy?" Her voice drifted down the stairs, thin and sweet as spun sugar, followed by another wet cough that made Veronica's shoulders tense with recognition. "Is someone here? I heard talking." Ryan started to rise from his chair, paternal instincts overriding everything else, but Veronica's hand on his arm stopped him cold. Her touch was firm but gentle, the touch of someone accustomed to delivering life-changing news to people standing on the edge of hope and despair. "Let me tell you why I'm really here," she said, her eyes fixed on his with laser intensity that seemed to see through all his carefully constructed defenses. My daughter asked me a question this morning that I couldn't answer, and it made me realize I've been hiding from the very thing that could give my life meaning. She wanted to know why rich people don't help sad daddies when they can, Veronica continued, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of revelation. I realized I've been hiding behind my guilt for 3 years, building walls of money and success while children like Hazel suffer in silence, their parents sending desperate messages into the void because the system has failed them completely. She released his arm and stepped back, but her gaze never wavered from his face, studying him with the intensity of someone trying to memorize every detail. Isabella reminded me that having the power to help and choosing not to use it makes you complicit in the suffering, that wealth without purpose is just elaborate decoration on an empty life. The words carried weight beyond their simple meaning, settling into the room like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that would change everything they touched. Ryan felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the vice that had gripped his heart since Hazel's diagnosis, making room for something he'd almost forgotten how to feel. Veronica opened her handbag with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation, each movement deliberate and controlled. Inside, Ryan glimpsed official-looking documents bound in leather, a checkbook that probably cost more than his monthly rent, and a small framed photograph of a dark-haired girl with Sarah's gentle smile and eyes that sparkled with mischief. "I'm prepared to cover all of Hazel's medical expenses," she said, producing a thick manila envelope that seemed to pulse with possibility. "Surgery, chemotherapy, the experimental treatment we've been developing, everything she needs to get well and live a normal childhood." Her hands didn't shake as she held out the envelope, but Ryan caught the way her breathing had changed, shallow and quick, like someone approaching the edge of a cliff and preparing to jump. "The only condition is that you let my daughter be part of Hazel's journey toward healing." The envelope felt heavy in Ryan's hands, weighted with possibilities that seemed too enormous to comprehend, too good to be real in a world that had systematically dismantled every dream he'd dared to nurture. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking on the single syllable like glass under pressure. "Why would you do this for us? We're strangers. You don't owe us anything." Veronica's smile was sad and beautiful, transforming her face from corporate mask to something achingly human, vulnerable in ways that money couldn't protect against. "Because 3 years ago, I promised your wife I would find a way to help families like yours, and I've spent every day since then building the resources to keep that promise." She gestured toward the photograph in her bag, her fingers trembling slightly as they traced the silver frame. "And because Isabella's heart is bigger than mine, and she reminded me what it means to have power and purpose, to use privilege as a bridge rather than a wall." "Daddy?" Hazel's voice called again, stronger this time, accompanied by the soft thud of small feet on stairs that had learned to announce her approach with their familiar creak and sigh. Ryan's throat constricted as his daughter appeared in the doorway like sunshine breaking through clouds, her pale face lit by curiosity instead of the pain that had been her constant companion for months. She wore her favorite unicorn pajamas, the ones Sarah had bought her last Christmas, in a moment of hope and denial, now hanging loose on her diminished frame, but still carrying the magic of better days. "Who's the pretty lady?" Hazel asked, eyeing Veronica with the direct honesty that only children possessed, her gaze taking in the expensive coat, the pearl earrings, the general aura of someone who existed in a different world entirely. Her question hung in the air like a bridge waiting to be crossed, innocent and profound in the way that children's observations always were. Veronica knelt to Hazel's eye level with fluid grace, her cashmere coat pooling around her like spilled ink, transforming from intimidating business executive to something softer and more accessible. "Hello, sweetheart," she said, Her voice transformed into something warm and maternal, stripped of corporate efficiency and filled with genuine tenderness. "My name is Veronica, and I'm a doctor who knew your mummy when she was in the hospital." Hazel's eyes widened with interest rather than fear, and Ryan felt his heart perform an impossible acrobatic feat, expanding and contracting simultaneously with love and terror. "You knew Mummy?" Hazel whispered, stepping closer with the fearless trust that children reserve for people who speak to them like they matter, like their thoughts and feelings deserve respect and attention. "She was very brave," Veronica replied, reaching out to touch Hazel's thin cheek with infinite gentleness. "Just like you are every day." The morning light streaming through the windows seemed to brighten as Hazel studied Veronica's face with the scientific intensity that sick children develop, learning to read adult expressions for signs of hope or despair. "Are you going to make me better?" she asked with the direct pragmatism that had broken Ryan's heart 100 times. Children who face mortality learning to cut through adult euphemisms with surgical precision. "Are you magic like the doctors in my stories?" Veronica's composure finally cracked, tears gathering in her eyes like morning dew on flower petals, threatening to spill over and reveal the depth of emotion she'd kept carefully contained for 3 years. "I'm going to try my very best," she promised, her voice thick with the kind of emotion that comes from understanding exactly what failure means in this context. "And I'm going to introduce you to my daughter, Isabella. She's been asking for a friend who understands what it's like to be brave every single day." Ryan watched this exchange through a haze of disbelief and desperate hope, afraid that moving or speaking might shatter the moment like spun glass under hammer blows. The envelope in his hands felt both weightless and impossibly heavy, containing not just medical bills and treatment schedules, but the possibility of a future he'd stopped allowing himself to imagine. "There's a car waiting outside," Veronica said, rising to her full height with renewed purpose, her transformation back to efficiency somehow comforting in its decisiveness. "If you're ready, we can take Hazel to the Children's Hospital for a full evaluation. My team is standing by." Her words carried the authority of someone accustomed to making miracles happen through sheer force of will and unlimited resources, someone for whom impossible was just another problem requiring the right combination of money and determination. The casual mention of "my team" revealed layers of preparation that stretched far beyond this single morning conversation. "Can we go now, Daddy?" Hazel asked, bouncing on her toes with more energy than Ryan had seen in weeks, her enthusiasm infectious and heartbreaking in equal measure. "I want to meet Isabella, and I want to get better so we can play together and have sleepovers and do all the things friends do." Her words tumbled over each other in excitement, filling the shabby living room with a brightness that had nothing to do with the morning sun and everything to do with the simple human capacity for hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. Ryan felt tears threatening for the first time in months, not tears of despair, but something infinitely more dangerous, the kind of hope that could either save him or destroy what little emotional stability he'd managed to construct. He looked from his daughter to Veronica, these two females who had somehow conspired to change his world in the space of a single conversation, their combined force more powerful than cancer or poverty or any of the other enemies that had been systematically dismantling his life. "Yes," he whispered, then cleared his throat and tried again with more conviction, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Yes, we can go now. Let's go meet Isabella and see what miracles look like." Veronica's smile was radiant, transforming her entire face into something approaching beauty rather than mere perfection, revealing the person she'd been before grief and guilt had taught her to hide behind professional competence. She produced her phone with practiced efficiency, fingers flying across the screen as she sent messages that would set an entire medical team into motion, mobilizing resources that Ryan couldn't have accessed with years of planning and preparation. "The car is a 7-minute drive from here," she announced, her tone suggesting that this timing had been calculated rather than estimated. "Dr. Morrison is expecting us at the pediatric oncology wing. He's one of the country's leading specialists in childhood leukemia, and he's been working with our experimental protocols." As they prepared to leave, Ryan caught sight of himself in the hallway mirror, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing yesterday's clothes like armor against a world that had been systematically dismantling his life one bill at a time. Beside him, Veronica straightened Hazel's unicorn pajamas with maternal instincts that seemed as natural as breathing, her expensive manicure gentle against faded cotton. "She can wear whatever makes her comfortable," Veronica said, noticing his concern about Hazel's appearance in such a formal medical setting. "The important thing is that she feels safe and loved, not that she looks like she belongs in our world." Her words carried layers of meaning that had nothing to do with clothing choices and everything to do with the kind of care that money couldn't buy but could certainly facilitate. The distinction between belonging and being welcomed had never seemed more important than it did in that moment, watching a stranger treat his daughter with more consideration than the medical system had shown them in months of desperate appeals. The Porsche's interior smelled like leather and possibility, its heated seats embracing Hazel like a mechanical hug designed by engineers who understood that comfort could be a form of medicine. Ryan found himself in the passenger seat of a car worth more than his annual salary, watching familiar streets blur past through windows that probably cost more than his monthly rent, everything transformed by the simple presence of hope. Veronica drove with the same controlled precision she brought to everything else, her movements economical and confident, navigating traffic with the ease of someone for whom obstacles were merely temporary inconveniences. "Isabella's been asking about the sad daddy from the text message all morning," she said, glancing at Ryan through the rearview mirror with eyes that missed nothing. "I think she's been lonely despite all her privileges, and meeting Hazel might be exactly what they both need to understand that connection transcends circumstance." The children's hospital rose before them like a cathedral of healing, its glass towers reflecting morning clouds in patterns that shifted like kaleidoscope fragments, each floor representing hope for families like his who had exhausted their other options. Ryan had been here countless times before, but always through the emergency entrance, always as a desperate father clutching insurance cards that covered too little and hoping for miracles he couldn't afford. Today, Veronica led them through the main entrance, past marble fountains and artwork donated by families whose children had found healing within these walls, their gratitude transformed into beauty for others to draw strength from. The receptionist's face lit up when she saw Veronica approaching, recognition and respect transforming her professional smile into something genuinely warm, the kind of welcome reserved for people who made generous donations and asked for little in return except the satisfaction of helping. "Dr. Sterling," the receptionist said, rising from behind her polished desk with the deference usually reserved for hospital board members and major benefactors. "Dr. Morrison is waiting for you in the private consultation suite on the 15th floor." Private consultation suite. Ryan had never even known such places existed in hospitals, had only ever seen the cramped examination rooms where harried residents delivered news in 5-minute increments between other patients, their attention divided among too many cases and too little time. Veronica's hand found his shoulder, steering him toward an elevator that required a special key card to access. Another reminder that different rules applied when you weren't alone in fighting for your child's life. "Money doesn't buy miracles," she murmured, reading his expression with disturbing accuracy. "But it does buy time and attention and the luxury of hope without desperation. It buys the right to ask questions and expect answers, the privilege of being heard rather than processed." The elevator ascended silently, carrying them toward a floor Ryan had never imagined existed, where medicine met luxury in ways that transformed the entire experience of illness from something to be endured into something that could be navigated with dignity. Hazel pressed her nose against the glass, watching the city shrink below them with the wonder of a child who'd spent too many days confined to bed, her breath fogging the windows as she traced patterns in the condensation. "Look, Daddy," she whispered, her voice filled with the kind of awe that reminded him why children were naturally resilient in ways adults had forgotten. "We're flying like birds, but inside a building." Veronica watched this interaction with something approaching hunger in her eyes, as if she were memorizing every detail of a child's innocent joy for later contemplation. "Isabella loves elevators too," she said softly, her voice carrying the warmth of shared experience. "She calls them vertical magic carpets that take you to different worlds on every floor." Dr. Morrison waited in a consultation room that looked more like a luxury hotel suite than a medical facility, every detail designed to make impossible conversations slightly more bearable for families facing decisions no parent should have to make. Soft lighting that made everyone look healthier, comfortable furniture arranged for conversation rather than clinical examination. Artwork that whispered rather than shouted. Everything calculated to reduce the institutional anxiety that made hospitals feel like places where hope went to die. He was younger than Ryan expected, with kind eyes and hands that moved with the gentle confidence of someone who spent his days performing miracles on patients who measured their lives in months rather than years. "Hazel," he said, kneeling to her level with practiced ease that spoke of countless similar introductions. "I'm Dr. Morrison, and I'm going to help you feel better. But first, I need to ask you some questions and do some tests that might feel a little strange. Is that okay with you?" Hazel nodded solemnly, her small hand finding Ryan's with automatic trust that made his heart clench with protective, fierce love. The examination lasted 2 hours, but time seemed suspended in that quiet room where hope and medical science intersected in ways Ryan had never experienced, where his daughter was treated like a person rather than a case file. Dr. Morrison's questions were thorough but gentle, his hands skilled and careful as he examined Hazel with the attention of someone who understood that children were not miniature adults, but entirely different creatures requiring entirely different approaches to healing. He explained each procedure before performing it, showing Hazel the instruments and letting her touch the stethoscope, transforming potential fear into curiosity through the simple act of inclusion and respect. Veronica remained throughout, sometimes conferring with Dr. Morrison in medical terminology that flew over Ryan's head like bird songs in a foreign language, their professional shorthand revealing layers of preparation and planning that stretched far beyond this single consultation. Her presence transformed the entire experience from terrifying medical procedure to collaborative effort among people who genuinely cared about his daughter's welfare. "The good news," Dr. Morrison said finally, settling into his chair with the deliberate movements of someone preparing to deliver complex information with clarity and compassion, "is that we caught this early enough to be optimistic about Hazel's prognosis. Her leukemia is aggressive, but it's also the type that responds very well to the new treatment protocols Dr. Sterling's company has developed." He turned to a computer screen filled with charts and graphs that meant nothing to Ryan, but seemed to please both doctors, their shared understanding of medical complexity transforming into hope he could finally begin to trust. "We'll start with a modified chemotherapy regimen designed specifically for children her age and condition, followed by the targeted therapy that's showing remarkable results in our clinical trials." Ryan felt something inside his chest unclench for the first time in months, a loosening of the iron bands that had made breathing feel like drowning since Hazel's diagnosis had turned their world upside down. "The treatment will be intensive," Dr. Morrison continued, "but children Hazel's age typically respond very well, and we expect her to return to completely normal activities within 6 months. How long until we know if it's working?" Ryan asked, the question scraping against his throat like broken glass, each word weighted with months of accumulated fear and sleepless nights spent watching his daughter's condition deteriorate. Dr. Morrison's smile was genuine, unforced by professional obligation or the need to maintain false optimism in the face of uncertainty. "We should start seeing improvement within the first 2 weeks of treatment," he replied, his confidence based on experience rather than hope. "Children's bodies respond much faster than adults, and the new protocols are designed to target the specific genetic markers we've identified in Hazel's blood work." The technical details washed over Ryan like a foreign language, but the underlying message was clear. His daughter had a real chance at a normal life, at growing up and arguing about bedtime and worrying about homework instead of whether she would live to see her next birthday. "Can I still go to school?" Hazel asked, her priorities refreshingly clear and wonderfully normal. "And can I meet Isabella soon? I want to show her my stuffed animals and tell her about my mommy. Isabella is actually here today," Veronica said, producing her phone with theatrical timing that suggested careful coordination rather than coincidence. "She's been waiting in the family lounge since we arrived, probably driving the staff crazy with questions about everything from IV pumps to the cafeteria's Jell-O selection." Hazel's face lit up with excitement that transformed her entire appearance, from sick child to normal 7-year-old anticipating a new friendship, her enthusiasm infectious enough to fill the room with energy that had nothing to do with medical procedures and everything to do with the simple human need for connection. "She wanted to be here when we finished talking to Dr. Morrison," Veronica continued, "so she could meet you properly and show you the coloring books she brought to share." The casual mention of preparation and forethought revealed the depth of consideration that had gone into this entire day, transforming what could have been a clinical transaction into something approaching genuine care. "Can we meet her now?" Hazel asked, bouncing slightly in her chair with more vitality than Ryan had seen in weeks. "I want to ask her if she likes unicorns and if she knows any good jokes." The family lounge was a testament to the kind of thoughtful design that money could buy when it was guided by genuine understanding of human need. Soft furniture arranged for conversation rather than waiting, natural lighting that made everyone look healthier and more hopeful, and enough space for children to play without disturbing families navigating medical crises. Isabella stood by the window overlooking the city, her dark hair catching afternoon light like spun silk, wearing a yellow dress that seemed to generate its own sunshine and carrying a backpack that bulged with carefully chosen entertainment. When she turned toward them, Ryan saw Sarah's smile reflected in a stranger's child, the same gentle warmth that had first captured his heart and sustained him through their darkest days. "Mommy!" Isabella called, running toward Veronica with arms outstretched, her excitement genuine and uncontained. "Is this Hazel? Is she the brave girl from the text message? I brought her some of my favorite things to share." The introduction between the girls was magical in its simplicity. 2 children meeting without the complicated emotional baggage that adults carried into every interaction. Isabella approached Hazel with the careful consideration of someone much older than her 8 years, studying the pale face and thin frame with eyes that missed nothing but judged nothing, seeing a potential friend rather than a sick child. "I like your unicorn pajamas," she said finally, and Ryan watched his daughter's face transform with pleasure at this simple acceptance from someone who could have chosen pity or awkwardness instead. "My mommy says you're sick like other kids we help, but that you're going to get better because you're really brave and because the doctors here are really smart." Hazel straightened her shoulders unconsciously, embracing the identity of brave girl with the seriousness that children bring to important roles assigned by their peers. "Are you brave too?" she asked Isabella, and the question hung in the air like a bridge waiting to be crossed, an invitation to deeper friendship than either girl had expected to find. "I'm learning how to be brave in different ways," Isabella replied with startling honesty that revealed wisdom beyond her years. "My mommy teaches me about being brave by helping other families when they're scared and sad. She says that when you have more than you need, being brave means sharing it with people who need help, even when you don't know them yet. The simple wisdom of childhood cut through weeks of Ryan's complicated emotions about accepting charity from strangers, reframing Veronica's generosity as a collaborative act of courage rather than one-sided rescue that implied weakness or failure on his part. Watching the girls settle into conversation with the easy intimacy that children create effortlessly, Ryan felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of what was happening to his family. This wasn't just about medical bills and treatment protocols. It was about connection, purpose, and the possibility that his daughter's illness might somehow create healing for more than just her own small body. "Do you want to see what I brought?" Isabella asked, opening her backpack to reveal coloring books, puzzles, and a small, stuffed elephant that had clearly been chosen with care. Dr. Morrison appeared with treatment schedules and medication lists, paperwork that transformed hope into concrete action items with dates and times and measurable goals that made the future feel manageable rather than terrifying. "We'll start Monday morning with the first round of treatment," he explained, handing Ryan a folder thick with information that would have overwhelmed him just hours earlier. Now, backed by Veronica's resources and Isabella's friendship for Hazel, the medical complexity felt manageable rather than insurmountable, each form and schedule representing progress rather than bureaucratic obstacles. The first few weeks will require daily visits to monitor her response and adjust dosages, but we've arranged for transportation to and from the hospital, meals during treatment days, and Isabella will be here whenever Hazel wants company. The casual mention of these practical details, transportation, meals, companionship, revealed the depth of planning that had gone into this rescue operation, transforming crisis management into comprehensive care that addressed not just medical needs, but emotional and practical ones as well. As the afternoon sun slanted through the lounge windows, painting everything in golden light that seemed appropriate for endings and beginnings, Ryan found himself alone with Veronica while the girls played with a complicated puzzle that Isabella had brought specifically for sharing. "I don't know how to thank you for this," he said, the words feeling inadequate for the magnitude of what she'd given his family in the space of a single morning. Veronica's smile was soft and genuine, transforming her face from corporate efficiency to something approaching vulnerability that money couldn't buy or protect. "You already have," she replied, nodding toward the girls who were now giggling over the puzzle pieces like old friends rather than strangers thrown together by circumstance. "Isabella has been asking me for months when she could help a family like yours, when she could use her privilege for something meaningful instead of just having more toys and opportunities than she could ever use." Her voice carried the weight of parental guilt that transcended economic class, the universal struggle to raise children who understood their place in the world and their responsibility to others. Watching her with Hazel today, seeing her understand what it means to use abundance for purpose rather than comfort, that's a gift you've given her that money can't buy. The drive home felt different, charged with possibility rather than weighted with despair. Familiar streets transformed into pathways toward a future Ryan had stopped believing existed. Hazel chatted about Isabella, about the hospital's impressive fish tank, about Dr. Morrison's promise that she could keep her hair if the new medicine worked the way they hoped it would. Her enthusiasm filled the car like music, infectious and healing in ways that had nothing to do with medical intervention and everything to do with the simple human capacity for joy in the face of overwhelming challenges. "Daddy," she said as they pulled into their driveway, the familiar cracked concrete and peeling paint somehow looking more like home than they had in months. "Isabella wants to come to our house sometime to meet my stuffed animals and see pictures of Mommy. Can she come next week? I want to show her the photo album where Mommy is laughing at the beach." The casual mention of Sarah brought tears to Ryan's eyes, but they were different tears. Grateful rather than bitter, inclusive rather than isolating, carrying the possibility that his daughter's memories could be shared rather than hidden from the world. That evening, as Hazel slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, her breathing steady and unlabored, without the wheeze that had become her constant companion. Ryan sat in his kitchen reading through Dr. Morrison's treatment plan and Veronica's contact information. The medical terminology was still largely incomprehensible, but the timeline was clear and hopeful. 6 months of intensive treatment, followed by a lifetime of regular checkups and normal childhood experiences. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Isabella wanted me to send you this before bedtime." Below the message was a photo of the girls hugging goodbye in the hospital lobby, their faces bright with the promise of friendship that transcended the circumstances that had brought them together. A second text followed immediately. "She's already planning what games they'll play during treatment days. Thank you for letting us be part of Hazel's healing." The words carried weight beyond politeness, genuine gratitude that transformed his family's crisis into something approaching blessing. 2 weeks later, Ryan stood in the same hospital lounge watching Hazel receive her 3rd round of treatment with energy and curiosity rather than fear. The IV line that had initially terrified them both had become routine, just another part of the morning ritual that included breakfast with Isabella and planning activities for afterward. Dr. Morrison's predictions had proved accurate. Hazel's blood counts were improving dramatically, her energy returning like spring flowers emerging from winter soil. "Look, Daddy," she called from across the room where she and Isabella were building an elaborate tower from colorful blocks. "We're making a castle for brave princesses who help other people." Her voice carried strength that had been missing for months, the vibrant enthusiasm of a normal 7-year-old engaged in normal childhood activities. Veronica approached with test results that confirmed what they could all see. Hazel was responding beautifully to treatment, her body embracing healing with the resilience that made children such remarkable patients. "The doctors are amazed by her progress," Veronica said, settling beside Ryan with the comfortable ease of someone who had become family rather than benefactor over the weeks of shared medical appointments and childhood friendships. "Dr. Morrison says she's responding even better than they hoped, and if this continues, she could be in complete remission within another month." The words carried promise that Ryan had trained himself not to trust, but surrounded by evidence of his daughter's improving health, skepticism gave way to cautious optimism. "Isabella has a request," Veronica continued, her tone suggesting careful consideration of timing and appropriateness. "She wants to know if you and Hazel would like to spend Christmas at our house. She's been planning the perfect holiday for weeks, complete with stockings and cookies and all the traditions she thinks Hazel would enjoy." The invitation was casual in delivery, but profound in implication. An integration of their families that had grown from crisis into genuine connection over the course of shared hope and mutual healing. "She also wants to help other families like yours," Veronica continued, her voice carrying excitement that transformed her from reserved professional to enthusiastic collaborator. "She's been asking if we can start a foundation that helps children with cancer, something she could help run when she gets older. Isabella's Foundation for Brave Kids, she calls it." The name carried the simple poetry that children brought to important things, cutting through adult complexity to capture the essential truth of what they were trying to accomplish. "She wants to use her college fund to help families pay for treatment, and she's been drawing pictures of what the foundation building should look like." Ryan felt something expand in his chest, a recognition that his daughter's illness had somehow created ripples of purpose that extended far beyond their own healing, touching other lives in ways he never could have imagined when he sent that desperate text into the digital darkness. 4 months after that accidental message sent to the wrong number, Ryan stood in Veronica's kitchen on Christmas morning, watching Hazel and Isabella distribute presents to families they'd invited from the children's hospital. The foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations, funded by Veronica's resources, but driven by Isabella's vision of a world where no child faced cancer alone and no parent sent desperate messages to strangers because the system had failed them. "Look, Daddy," Hazel called, running toward him with arms full of wrapped gifts, her cheeks pink with health and excitement. We're helping the sad families become happy families, just like Isabella's mommy helped us when we were scared and alone. Her words carried the simple wisdom of childhood, reducing complex emotions to their essential truth, that healing happens through connection, that strength multiplies when shared, and that sometimes the wrong number turns out to be exactly the right call at exactly the right moment. The morning light streaming through the windows caught the girls' laughter, transforming it into something precious and permanent. A sound Ryan knew he would carry with him for the rest of his life, as proof that miracles still happened in a world that often forgot to believe in them.